Good evening, all you crazy cats and kittens. In light of the fact that we are now on week 3 of quarantine and we're all trying to figure out what this new normal looks like, I thought, let's do a little history and travel lesson. So I'm inviting you to join me on a journey to Peru, which is one of my favorite places on earth. And is not going to let me advance my slides. So a little bit of background about Peru. Officially, it's called the Republic of Peru. The civilization in Peru dates all the way back to the 4th century BCE, which makes it one of the oldest and longest surviving civilizations in the entire world. Spanish is the main language that's spoken there, but you still hear the language of Quechua, which was the official language of the Incan Empire, probably the best known of all the pre-Columbian civilizations. You'll hear Aymara, which is spoken in the region around Puno and Lake Titicaca, and Aymara was once more prevalent than that, and Quechua actually has a large base in the language of Aymara. Peru's considered a mega diverse country. It's got Pacific coastline, like you see here in Lima and all up and down the coast, which is extremely long. Has the arid deserts like the Atacama, where you'll see the Nazca lines. It has the Amazon River and jungle. It's got the Andean highlands and the Andes Mountains, where you'll find Machu Picchu and Cuzco. Today, around 32 million people live in Peru. The capital of Peru is Lima, which is where we're going to start our journey today. When you visit Peru, you'll be shown warmth. They're very kind and energetic people. They welcome you in. They love to show you their country and their culture. Their culture is a blend of indigenous tradition and colonial elements, so mainly Spanish and Catholicism. What I particularly enjoyed when I was in Peru was the food. So, like I said, the capital of Peru is Lima. Lima is a huge city. It's got over 9 million people living in it. It's one of the largest cities in South America. I want to say it's one of the largest cities in all of the Americas. It's a bustling metropolis. It sits on cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. At night, people flock to the beaches to watch the sunset. They play drums. You walk down these very steep steps and you hear the music in the background as people are playing through the sunset. There are beautiful colonial buildings. There's some old world architecture there from not prehistoric times, but from pre-Columbian times. If you go, I suggest staying in the neighborhood of Miraflores or maybe Barranca. They're kind of artsy and young. A lot of fun things to do there, great restaurants, good food. I would not suggest you drive there. We learned that driving really follows the rules of there are no rules, mostly guidelines, and those are not usually followed. But Lima is a great place to start your Peruvian adventure, and it's going to be your jumping off point for everywhere you go. The best way to get around Peru is really by airline. You can take buses, you can take trains, but those do take longer. So if you hop a flight to Lima, you can be to Cuzco in an hour, hour and a half. So we're going to do a little bit of background information right now and talk about the Inca, because I think the Inca are probably the best known civilization and iconic to when we think about Peru. They're not the oldest civilization in Peru. They come on the coattails of the Chavin and the Moche. There were lots of people living in Peru and existing in Peru before the Inca, but they are the best known. The Inca existed from about 1200 to 1572. A lot of people think that they were there for a long, long time, and they were really kind of a short-lived empire. Francisco Pizarro brought about their end. He was a Spanish conquistador, and he's the one who conquered them and their final emperor Atahualpa, like I said, in 1572. At the height of the Incan Empire, they had 16 million people living in it. Their success was dependent on how well organized they were. They had a major road system that spanned all areas of the empire, that went north to south, east to west. It connected the 4 provinces. They believed that their ruler, the Incan Empire, was a descendant of the sun god Inti, and so he wasn't to be trifled with and wasn't to be questioned. They had a very strong army and were able to keep people in order and in line because of those things. They referred to their empire as Tawa Nitsuyu, which means the four regions. So I talked a little bit about the Incan road system. You can see the stairs there. The Incan road system spanned around 25,000 miles, which rivals the Roman Empire, even though it existed about 1,000 years later. It had bridges, it had storage depots for goods. There were rest stops built a day's walk apart where they could rest at night with their llamas and their goods and then continue their journey. They could mobilize troops along these. They were well maintained. The majority of the money that the Incan government spent was to maintain the roads. An interesting thing about the Inca was they had no writing system. And if you ever took world history from me, you know that having a writing system is one of the 6 characteristics of civilization. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't keep records. They used a very complex system of keeping records called the quipu, which you see here on the left. The quipu was a series of knotted strings that you could use to record how much gold you had, how many potatoes you had. It was based on a number system of 10. So if they had gold string and they would knot it in certain ways, then they could read that quipu and say, this is how much gold is in the empire, this is how much gold's in the district or the province. So just really highly well organized society, and able to control, like I said, 16 million people at their height. This is a picture of their terrace farming. The Inca survived primarily on agriculture. They did eat meat, but most of their foods were agricultural. They grew over 2,000 types of potatoes. They harvested quinoa, squash, corn, even cucumber. And they used a system of terrace farming like this in the Andes to work within that terrain and that geography so that they could manage those crops and have maximum output. And even today, when you drive through the Sacred Valley and you see some farmers, there are still farmers today that utilize this type of agricultural practice to work within the environment in which they live. The Inca also grew coca, not to use it as cocaine, but they would chew on the leaves or steep the leaves into tea, and it was helpful for them to combat the high altitude of the Andes. And even today, when you go to Peru, when you land in Cuzco or in any of the higher elevations like Puno, they'll offer you coca tea or coca candy to help you acclimate to that. So really kind of an interesting culture and an interesting way of farming. The capital of the Incan Empire was Cuzco. Cuzco is a place where most people will go from Lima. This is where you would start your journey to the Sacred Valley and then eventually to Machu Picchu, which is the main tourist attraction really of Peru. Sitting above Cuzco is Sacsayhuaman, which is a religious site. We don't know how they got those huge rocks there. I put that picture there so you could see how big they were using me to scale. But we know that every year they had a festival there called Inti Raymi, which is a celebration of the sun god around the winter, or I'm sorry, the summer solstice. And so you can tour all of that. Cuzco is a really neat city. I would suggest spending several days there. And then, like I said, you would start your journey through the Sacred Valley and into Machu Picchu from there. One of the delicacies of Peru is cuy, which is guinea pig. And all through the Sacred Valley, you can see them standing on the side of the road with little guinea pigs on spits that they've roasted, and you can buy them. We weren't so brave. We went to a restaurant to get ours, and he came out with a little tomato hat and a pepper mouthpiece. It's an interesting flavor. I suggest trying it. As my best friend said, it tastes like chicken until it doesn't. But you definitely want to try the cuy if you're there. By the way, they call it cuy because of the little noise it makes. So yeah, guinea pigs, sad. As you travel through the Sacred Valley, you'll see several different Incan ruins and Incan sites. Maras is a really cool place to visit. This is a salt mine. The Incans use this to harvest salt, and people still harvest salt there today. So when we left with all sorts of bags of different flavored salts. But each one of those little areas that you see there is actually leased or owned by a different family. And that's how they make their living. And they go in and they tend to that and they harvest the salt eventually. And that's how they make their money. Pisac is another place that you'll stop in the Sacred Valley. It rivals Machu Picchu in a lot of ways, especially from a terrace agriculture perspective. So it's an interesting place to visit and see if you go, not just to go to Machu Picchu, but to see these other sites. So to get to Machu Picchu, you're going to have to jump off in a little town called Aguas Calientes, which means hot water. I loved this town. It is so cute, as you can see. It's built on this beautiful river, and it just goes up and up and up, all the way up into the mountains where there are hot springs that you can visit and hiking trails. There are no cars in Aguas Calientes, so the only thing that's allowed in there are the buses that take you to Machu Picchu. And there's only two ways to get there. You can either go by train or you can walk in. We walked in, we took the train out. But I do suggest if you're able and you're capable, you can do the walk. I'm not saying you have to do the Salcantay trek and go across the top of the Andes, but you could do a 12-kilometer or so hike from Hydroelectrica along the railroad track and follow it in, and it's definitely worth it. But once you're in Aguas Calientes, also known as Machu Picchu Pueblo, you'll get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and on the picture that you see there on the left, people will line that street starting at 4 o'clock in the morning to get on one of those green buses to take them up to Machu Picchu. In Machu Picchu, the rules have changed. It used to be that you could come in all day. When we went 2 years ago, they had just changed the rules, and there were 2 entrance times, and there are dedicated paths that you have to follow, but we were allowed to enter up to 3 times. And so we followed all the different paths. I did go the wrong way one time in a path, and they will chase you down and blow whistles at you for you to turn around. They have llamas roaming about, and you see on the right, that is a chinchilla. Chinchillas, just free range chinchillas, just roam around Peru, and they were actually killed and used for fur. If you've ever touched a chinchilla, you know how soft they are, but they're indigenous to Peru and South America and the Andes, and they were used for their fur. And we just happened to see one. Morgan actually spotted it just hanging out on the rocks. And then there's just llamas everywhere. And they use llamas as their pack animals because they're well adapted to the high altitude and being able to walk on rocky terrain. They also used alpaca. And then they also use llama, alpaca, and something called vicuña for their woven textiles, which are one of the things that are most prized coming out of Peru. Machu Picchu is an amazing place. There are 2 hikes that you can take. One is Machu Picchu Mountain. You will go up lots and lots of stairs. I think we broke 900 stairs that day. And then the other is Huayna Picchu, which is much steeper. There's a series of ropes and ladders, but you do need a ticket to get in there. And if you're going to do either, you need to not be faint of heart, because there are steady drops and lots of stairs, and it is beautiful and breathtaking, but it is not for the faint of heart, like I said. Another place that you should visit if you go to Peru is Puno and the Lake Titicaca area. Lake Titicaca is oftentimes referred to as the highest navigable lake in the world. It sits around 12,500 feet. So even when we were in Cuzco and in Machu Picchu, we weren't that high. Cuzco sits around 11.5 and Machu Picchu only sits around 9. So this was the highest elevation that we were at when we were in Peru. It is the last place we went, so at that point in time, we were pretty acclimated to the high altitude. When you go to Puno, one of the things you have to do is take a tour of the Oros, which are reed islands that you can see here. The indigenous people of Lake Titicaca in this area live on these reed islands, which they build in the middle of Lake Titicaca. And the picture you see in the top left, she was actually the mayor of that island when we went to visit. And they do weaving that you can see down in the bottom left. We each bought one of those. They're just beautiful, bright colors made with alpaca and llama wool. We took a little boat ride. You can see in that top left picture, there's a boat there. We got to ride around Lake Titicaca in the boat, and then we visited the main island of Tequila and had lunch there and walked around. Also a really cool area. Definitely someplace you want to go and want to visit. We took a bus from Cusco to Puno, but you can also fly. And then coming home, we flew from Puno back to Lima to go home. So thank you for tuning in. I hope this inspires you to learn more about Peru and maybe visit this beautiful country. If you have any questions or want to know more, let me know. Have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye.